Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Manga Rider and today I want to ask you guys a very personal question. Has there ever been a movie from your childhood that you once really liked, and when you came back to it years later and can point out numerous flaws and even plot holes, you're able to look past them and still admire it for being a movie that brought you so much joy in your past? And with that question in mind, I also want to ask a second question. When you went back to that childhood movie, did you end up liking it more as an adult than you did as a kid? I'll let you pause the video to make a quick comment answering those questions if you want, but for me personally, the movie that pretty much made my childhood, and on top of that, the movie that has managed to be better than I remember it being, even though it objectively isn't, is a little movie that was the first theatrical debut of a small little engine, Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Thomas the Tank Engine was a show that left a massive impact on me as a kid, so when I was gifted this movie by my parents, I got to watching it immediately, and needless to say, I probably saw this movie at least 20 to 30 times during my early childhood years. I was in love with it. I was completely encapsulated by the world, the story, the characters, and the effects that I thought were beautiful back then. Which was why I was actually a little afraid to go back to this film many years later, as I didn't want those fond memories to be destroyed. But as I said before, to my absolute relief, that didn't happen. And that old childhood spark that I haven't felt in years was relit even bigger than before. I've thought about how I was going to tackle this movie for a while now, and I think the best thing to do is to go down the same route as the Sonic OVA and the Mario Galaxy videos, so if you watch those videos, you know what to expect. So without any further delay, let's first go over the story. The story of Thomas and the Magic Railroad takes place on the island of Sodor, where Thomas and friends are being threatened by a new diesel engine named Diesel 10, and his minions, Splatter and Dodge, where Diesel 10 plans to destroy a lost engine that originally escaped from him many years ago. Mr. Conductor, who comes from Shining Time Station, a whole other show, this is actually a crossover between two franchises, and I think that's odd. A place that's in our world, Sodor is now an alternate dimension and not an island in the Irish Sea, has been having a bit of trouble with his travels between the two worlds because he's slowly running out of his only transportation device called gold dust, which during one of Diesel's attacks runs out completely. During this, the lost engine, who is called Lady, has been kept safe up in a mountain and cared for by Brunette Stone, who was there when the awful Diesel Nation attacked and hasn't been able to relight her steam for many years because every call that he's tried has no effect. The reason why Lady is so important is because without her, no gold dust can be made, and if she's destroyed, the engines will die. So it's up to Mr. Conductor to understand the mystery of getting his gold dust back with the help of his cousin C. Jr. and Brunette's granddaughter named Lily, Brunette to get the right coal to relight Lady's fire and save Sodor, and Thomas to help them along the way while avoiding Diesel 10 and his mischief. Wow. When I was writing this portion of the script, I was not expecting it to be this confusing to summarize. This film surprisingly has a lot going on throughout the narrative, and there's even more story to this thanks to a subplot that focuses on Brunettes' backstory, which I will explain later. Brunettes' backstory is both the best part of this film because of the way it accurately represents Brunette's depression and regret for what happened many years ago, and his attempt to continuously try and help Lady even when he has no idea what he's doing is actually quite heartbreaking to watch. But on the other hand, this subplot is the worst part of the film because it makes the movie very confusing because of the timeline of events that take place. Brunette's backstory is basically this. Throughout the movie, childhood-like voices can be heard from Brunette as a child, being told that he was assigned to protect Lady by the Conductor family, and we can also hear his childhood lover making him promise her to give her a ride on Lady. But unfortunately, Brunette crashed Lady and wasn't able to fix her in time, which means that his childhood lover, now wife, passed away before he could fix her. Okay. Let's try and break this down. Let's just assume that Brunette was a child when he drove Lady and was still a child when he crashed her. Judging by the voice, he sounds around, I don't know, 9 to me.
Tasha, the Conductor family has a little steam engine with their own railroad.
Considering that Peter Fonda, Brunette's actor, was 59 years old at the time of this film came out, he's now dead, rest in peace, let's just assume that Brunette's character is about the same age. With this information in mind, that means that Lady crashed about 50 years ago. So Lady hasn't been in activity for 50 years, and only now does everything go to shit? How much gold dust was this engine producing for it to only now start running out? Why has Diesel 10 decided to come back 50 years later? Where has he been? How did Brunette get Lady to this place if she crashed? Why hasn't Brunette tried to get coal from Sodor? To the movie's credit, it actually explains that Lady was once the only way to get between worlds before gold dust, so that's most likely why. But if that was the case, then surely Brunette would have had some gold dust on him, or at least some was given to him, because he said he was given Lady by the Conductor family. She's the main source of gold dust, how the two worlds connect, and how the Conductor family are still alive. That's pretty fucking important. Why did the Conductor family even give Lady to Brunette, who was a child at the time? Couldn't they just guard her themselves? Why didn't they tell Mr. Conductor about who was guarding Lady if her survival is crucial to the production of gold dust, instead of just being mystical assholes that give him only hints to the source of his power? Mr. Conductor could be trapped on Sodor forever and is likely going to die. What are you doing?
Then watch the swirls that spin so well. Oh, where's the writing gone?
What the? Okay, that's just being dickish. Furthermore, why are the hints to the source of Lady's power on Sodor? Wouldn't it be smarter if the information was in Shining Time Station, their actual home? Also, why do the hints just vanish and not come back after someone reads them? That's the fate of your bloodline you're trying to keep alive. What? How have Mr. Conductor or Junior never seen Lady? Was she gone for that long? If Lady is the producer of gold dust, which is meant to keep them alive, where did they get gold dust before? How do the Conductor family even exist? Where was Lady created? It can't be Sodor because Mr. Conductor is from Shining Time Station, which is Earth. So how did the gate between Shining Time and Sodor even happen? On top of that, if Sodor coal was the only coal that got Lady to work, how did they light her up in the first place? Wouldn't that be something the Conductor family tell Brunette? Because that's some pretty vital information. This timeline just makes no sense. Quick little intervention here. I did a little bit more research into the film, and according to a fandom wiki, according to the film's script, Brunette is around 60 years old. So I was 1 year off. So rather than me guessing it being around 50 years ago, it's around 51 years ago. I don't know why I'm telling you this, because my point still stands. Because the story makes no sense. I also did a little bit more research, and I found out that Peter Fonda wasn't even 59. He was 60. How did I get this wrong? The timeline also raises some questions about how the lore in the movie itself works. Why would Shining Time Station go to shit if Mr. Conductor isn't there? How long does he have to be gone in order for that to happen? If he knows the risks of him being absent, why would he take the Fat Controller's place when he went on holiday? I'm sure that's probably just pride and that he's probably never had to deal with something this serious before in his life, but come on, that's not something you can take too lightly. If Lady is the source of the engines on Sodor being alive, how are they even alive if Lady isn't even in their realm anymore? I guess life is interdimensional? Also, did Sodor just appear when Lady was created? I don't know, it's never explained. This raises questions as to why Diesel 10 even wants to destroy her. Why would he?
She escaped me once before. As long as she exists, so do the others. But if she can be destroyed...
If his explanation is true, then wouldn't he technically count? Would he die as well if Lady was killed by him? Does Lady only affect steam engines? Because if that's the case, then why are the Diesel sentient? How in the name of God have the engines gone for this long without knowing that these specific buffers are magical? It's a little too plot convenient. When Lady goes to Sodor at the end of the movie, she actually gains some sentience. However, when Thomas goes to Earth, instead of losing his sentience, he just keeps it. Why is that? Why are the rules different for Thomas and Lady? Is it because Thomas is from Sodor and thus is different because Lady was created elsewhere? Questions are raised and are never answered. The film also just takes so many rules that was from Thomas's lore and just completely chucks them out the window. The reason I'm even bothering on trying to go over this is because Thomas and the Magic Railroad is talked about as being canon in some areas, according to the fandom wiki. So let's just go over some stuff that I found. The island of Sodor, which was originally an island that was canonically said to be somewhere in the Irish Sea, is now in its own universe. The engines are now completely sentient, which means that they don't need drivers to run them, which is another thing that wasn't in the original series. Though weirdly enough, Bertie has a driver in this movie? For some reason. Granted, the show was never great when it came to fully concreting on how much control the engines actually had over their actions, so the decision to remove the drivers entirely does make some sense because it makes it less confusing. But just because it's less confusing, that doesn't mean it's no longer confusing. In the show, it canonically states that Henry's coal is Welsh coal, which is different to the other engines, whereas in this movie, they all use special Sodor coal. Why? Signs and tumbleweeds aren't sentient in the show. It's only mainly vehicles. The magical flowers that Mr. Conductor uses to call the Fat Controller and C Jr. don't exist in the original series, as well as a bunny that writes letters and gives people food. Yeah, I never understood this plot point. There is probably more that I missed, but that's what I found. So not only does this movie have a very messy world that's broken beyond imagination, but they ended up changing so many details to Thomas's world that it fails as an adaptation of the series, making it both confusing for people who haven't seen the show and people who are fans of it, like myself. If this was just a one-off movie where this film doesn't connect to the show or anything, I'd still make fun of the laughably convoluted story that makes little sense, but I'd be fine with it because it wouldn't be canon. But because this film is partially canon, like I previously mentioned, it makes me amused at the lack of consistency to the rules. Before you start saying that I shouldn't take this movie so seriously because it's made for kids, firstly, I'm not, I just like doing this form of content. And two, kids deserve quality storytelling, which this film in terms of world building and backstory doesn't have. But aside from all the stuff that I just talked about, the one thing I can give this film is that the pacing isn't bad. It's actually pretty good. The flow of the narrative contained inside the movie didn't have any hiccups. Cuts from Soto to Shining Time were structured well into each other and they weren't jarring when it happened. The mystery throughout the movie being pieced together is pretty good, and the magical tone the movie was trying to give off was able to stay mostly consistent, with the exception of Brunette's parts, which even still I thought were great. So to conclude, Thomas and the Magic Railroad's story, while having alright structure in terms of the ongoing story the movie is telling, completely fails in both world building and backstory, which leads to many questions and inconsistencies that were never addressed. In terms of the film's visual quality, I'd say that the movie was definitely made with the same amount of effort and passion that made the original show so charming to begin with. The sets of all the locations on Sodor are very beautiful to look at. Iconic locations like the windmill, Tidmouth Sheds, the smelter's yard, and Knapford Station are wonderfully upgraded to make the world look fresh and new. The models of stations, sheds, and buildings have a polished and refined feel to them. The watercolored sky adds wonderful contrast to the organic colors of the lands below. And all the forest, rocks, and trees are beautifully put together, with the tracks looking like they belong in the environment. The models for the engines were actually upgraded for this movie and for later seasons of the show, and oh my god, they look fantastic. Thomas has expressions that are just so good. To really show you the care that they put into the details of the sets, let me show you the attention to detail that's directed towards Tidmouth Sheds. In this scene, there are so many small details that make this set so much more organic. You see broken metal barrels and ladders, rusted chains, stacks of weathered wood, some old dusty water towers, coal pits with various amounts of coal, sidings containing many kinds of trucks, slightly bended lights, a still working smoke tower that is the smoke move in a certain direction as opposed to just straight up, small dark wooden paths for workers to walk on, and old rusted engine parts all over this set. All these little things put together masterfully show the place's age. Taken even further with the buildings that appear in small groups and spread out throughout the area, which have all kinds of construction to them, with some looking more new than others. The ground is finely filled with gravel with small mounds of sand and small chunks of rock mostly around the tracks that show that this location is busy and has always been quite clustered and high on resources. Even the tracks have this wonderful bendy, rusted, aged feel to them, like these tracks have been used by many kinds of engines for a very long period of time. The sheds themselves are wonderfully weathered and dusty in color, with a very light desaturated color scheme to the bricks that show the once lively colors being faded away over time, and the olive faded green color to the doors give off the exact same effect. The small genius detail of adding a blackened area above the entrance of the sheds where the engines will blow their steam against the bricks is a detail that, while simple, makes this world truly feel like it's alive. And you see examples of this all over the movie. But it isn't just the pre-made sets that give this world a lot of life. Another reason why the world of Sodor looks so alive is the great use of lighting and natural effects like mist and steam. And the best example I could find in this movie was the smelter's yard. The design and the layout of the smelter's yard set already does an amazing job at being this old and dangerous area in the daylight with many parts of dead engines and very bold metal towers, but at nighttime the set truly gets the chance to show off the ingenious construction of the area. The heavy shadows and deep reds inside the building do amazing at showing off the claustrophobic density of the inside, while the heavy mist on the outside that covers the tracks and partially covers some of the dead engines make this setting feel like it's an eerie graveyard, a place where villains would go. It's these small extra effects that make the world going from being an already pleasant looking model set to a proper setting that has life breathed into it, something that the show was amazing at and this movie was able to capture perfectly. It's all around really impressive stuff. Shining Time Station also looks really good, with the film doing a great job at showing the busy and magical aspects to the station very well, with warm lighting, lots of people, and impressive paintings on the walls. Thomas and the Magic Railroad, whenever it goes with being practical, captures the magic that the show had to a very faithful degree. So faithful in fact that there are sometimes some small visual and auditorial mistakes contained in the movie. Yeah, the show also had this as well, but the movie kinda has it and a lot of it's obvious. From engines calling out names of engines that aren't in the shot, very obvious cuts, the Magic Railroad being composed of one track but has a coal truck and a siding, small inconsistencies in dialogue.
Oh, Diesel won't bother with an old engine like me. He thinks I'm really useless.
It's the old teapot! Oh, smash him!
To some engine parts going flat out missing. There are a lot of mistakes to be found in this movie if you're paying attention or know a lot about the show. There is a good video by Great Western Studios who points out a lot of these, so if you want to see more, go watch that. I don't find these practical mistakes to be insulting, just kind of funny to point out. And it also makes me think that the practical effects was where most of the budget went, because the CGI contained in some scenes is pretty bad. And I mean TV movie levels of bad. Whenever the live action actors interact with the engines, it's mostly very obvious that they're blue screen into the scenes. From the color gradients of the actors being different to the engines, to the awful editing of characters flying through the air. Oh my god, that's adorable. And the CGI to give off the magical vibes to the Magic Railroad itself was really obvious, and it just doesn't look good at all. However, the thing that did give off the magical vibes of this movie was the soundtrack. Holy fucking shit, the music did not need to be this fucking good. Composed mostly by a composer named Tommy Mann, the orchestral music in this film does wonders at making this movie seem far more grandiose than it actually is. It has this very booming, large, and heartfelt essence to it, and I love it to pieces. The variations of the Shining Time theme and the iconic Thomas theme are all very beautifully composed, and the lyrical songs make me smile with childhood nostalgia. One thing that I noticed while I was researching this video was that fans of the show are mixed on the voice acting of the engines, with some saying the voices are fine to some saying the voices are terrible, and personally I'm on the side of it being fine, and honestly, I'd even go a step further. I think the voice acting is fucking great. While the voices of the engines are drastically different to what they were in the show, because having all the engines be voiced by one guy would have been really weird, I do feel like the voice actors capture the personalities of the engines surprisingly well, with one of my favorites going to Thomas himself, voiced by Edward Glenn. Glenn's voice, while it's way higher than previous incarnations of Thomas, in my opinion, the voice actually suits Thomas perfectly. He just sounds so much more like the snarky little character he was in the show, and I really enjoyed that. Even the voice of James, who was very clearly voiced by a woman named Susan Roman, was able to capture the bitterness and fragile ego of James's character very well. The voice may not be the most fitting, but the character certainly is, and honestly I take that. And I really appreciate it. But the voice I grew to love the most over the course of the film was Diesel 10, voiced by Neil Crone. He just fucking kills it in this movie. Every time he's on screen, you can just feel that Neil is having so much fun delivering his lines, and it has this very contagious charm to it. He's able to sound both intimidating and cunning to full of himself and funny, and sometimes almost a heartbeat. And the sound of his voice has this almost campy Disney villain vibe to it, which I just love personally. The creator of the show herself herself, Britt Allcroft, has a small cameo as the voice of Lady, and oh my god, it's just adorable. In terms of the live action actors, they all give off very charming performances. Alec Baldwin as Mr. Conductor is very campy throughout the whole movie, from his overreactive voice to his very good facial expressions. He basically fits the tone of the movie perfectly. He reminds me of those kinds of actors that, despite having dialogue that's not the greatest, he's able to sell the lines so effectively that I was fully invested in what he was saying, which is a very fine talent to have, and really does save some of the more awkward lines in this movie.
That's right, it's sugar, Diesel. And if I throw this in your tank, it'll seize you up for good.
Did you put all this here for me? But you must have known that I was coming. How kind of you. Mountain? Fountain? That might be something. I think I'll try the celery. I'm at the windmill. Now that's what I call a perfect landing. Beach, that's it. That's it.
I could actually say that for pretty much everyone in this movie, from Peter Fonda as Peter Stone to Michael E. Rogers as C. Jr. Most of the cast acting is like they know what kind of film they're in, and rather than just half-assing it, they have fun with it, and give the best kind of performances to best suit the tone of the film, which is mainly cheesy with a large amount of heart. Even with Mara Wilson, whose acting is easily the worst out of the cast, she's still able to act as if she's invested in the film, and is definitely trying her best to give off a convincing performance, which while it misses more times than it hits, has this weird charm to it that I just love. It's overall the kind of acting that makes me smile in thinking that the actors are just having fun on set, a vibe that is just contagious throughout this film, and I think that's the best way to describe this movie. It's pleasantly campy in its messiness. I know that by all stretches of filmmaking, this film is objectively bad. From the constant visual mistakes, campy acting, bad CGI, and a broken story that destroys the show's lore. But even despite those flaws, there was so much pleasantness throughout this movie, and so many good scenes in between, that it just makes me really love it, even with its flaws. That could just be my nostalgia talking, and it most likely is. But you know what? I don't care. I love Thomas and the Magic Railroad. I think it's a good movie. I love the sets, I love the characters, I love the broken story. And really, you just can't tell me otherwise. The power of subjectivity, ladies and gentlemen, the power of subjectivity. I definitely wouldn't recommend this to people who have never seen the show, but to the people who are fans of it and haven't seen the film in possibly many years, I suggest you give it another shot. I think with the right mindset, you might end up having some fun with this movie. And if you don't, well, at least you can have some fun picking it apart. Because believe me, I certainly did. I've had an absolute blast with this movie, and I would not change it for anything.
He's a really useful engine, you know.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this video. This video was a more personal video of mine, and it's been a thing I've wanted to talk about for a very long time, but I just never really knew how to word myself in a way that best suited me. Thomas the Tank Engine is a series that's very near and dear to my heart, so of course this review was a little more biased. But if you ended up liking or disliking this more nostalgia-filled positive videos, then tell me in the comment section below. I would love to hear some feedback. And if you'd like to hear more of my thoughts about Thomas as a whole, or the show, or any other movies, then by all means, comment below. I personally would love to do more nostalgia-filled videos about Thomas if you guys want to see more. But that's content for the future. And for now, my name is Manker Ryder, and I'll see you in the next one.
You